I hope everybody can hear me. As mentioned by Hans, I will be presenting to you the de-risking energy efficiency platform. My plan is to use the first 20 minutes of giving a bit of background. What is the background for this initiative? I will tell you a bit about the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, and which is also abbreviated the EEFIG, and I will be using that abbreviation. And I will also introduce the EEFIG de-risking project that has been running during 2016 and 17, and the two key deliverables coming out of the EEFIG de-risking project, which is the deep database that we'll focus on today, but I'll also briefly touch upon the EEFIG underwriting toolkit that was launched 2 weeks ago at the EU Sustainable Energy Week. Now, then I'll turn to the main topic of today, which is the de-risking energy efficiency platform. First, I'll talk about the data structure and the sources of data. I'll show you some of the key results emerging from the data we have in the database today. And I'll talk about how to become a user or a data provider to the platform. That'll take about 15 minutes. At that point, I would normally give you an online walkthrough of the platform. Unfortunately, that's not possible in the format we've been working in today. So I will do a similar walkthrough of the platform, but using overhead slides that kind of indicates what it would look like. And then I will strongly invite you to all visit the platform afterwards, because it's much nicer in reality, and you will be able to see much more interesting things when you use it yourself. That will take us to the end of the formal presentation, and then there's going to be a Q&A session somewhere around 20 minutes. So that's the plan. And initially we'll start with the intro on the EEFIG and the EEFIG de-risking project. Now, the background for all of this is the need to scale up energy efficiency investments in Europe. Energy efficiency investments have multiple benefits for the European Union. It reduces reliance on imported energy, which of course is important in geopolitical context, and it increases the competitiveness of Europe's industry if we have lower energy costs. And furthermore, it has important implications on local and global environmental problems. The building sector and the industry sector are very large contributors to the final energy consumption in the European Union. And many buildings were built before there were any building code requirements for energy efficiency. The building I live in Copenhagen was built in 1896, as all the buildings in the same neighborhood. And none of them have ever been met with any requirements for building energy efficiency. And most of the buildings that today are standing will still be standing in 2050. So there's a significant challenge on ensuring that energy efficiency investments are completed in the building sector. On the industry side, the EU's industry is already today a world leader in energy efficiency. But that does not mean that there is not still a significant saving potential in industry. Analysis has shown that in order for a 2-degree scenario to be met, there has to be very substantial investments in the building sector and the industry sector in energy efficiency up to 2035. 1.2 trillion euros in the building sector and 140 billion in the industry sector in energy efficiency. That is significantly higher than the current level of investments going into energy efficiency in these two sectors. And that means that the investment trends must increase multiple times. That was the background for the Director General on Energy, DG Energy, and the UNEP Financial Institutions Initiative to go together in 2013 to establish the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group. The purpose is to bring together in a working forum, so not a high-level decision group, but a working forum of public and private financial institutions, industry representatives and sector experts that have a common interest in promoting energy efficiency investments and overcoming some of the challenges for channeling long-term financing into energy efficiency. In 2015, the EEFIG group issued their first major deliverable. It's the report called Energy Efficiency, the First Fuel for the EU Economy. I can strongly recommend, if you have not already read that report, to revisit it. It is still as relevant today as when it was published, and it has been instrumental in a number of initiatives afterwards in the European Union. And it's a driver behind a number of the initiatives in the winter package. In the 2015 EFIG report, some of the problems highlighted were a lack of evidence on the actual performance of energy efficiency investments, making the benefits and the financial risk hard to assess, and making it difficult for financial institutions to have a credible decision basis when providing financing for energy efficiency investments. And another challenge highlighted was a lack of commonly agreed procedures and standards for how to risk assess and evaluate energy efficiency investments. These two challenges have been the focus of an ongoing project over the last 2 years, 2016 and 17, which is called the EFIG De-risking Energy Efficiency Project. The project has two major purposes. One is the creation of an open source database for energy efficiency investments, performance monitoring and benchmarking. That is what we're discussing today, the De-risking Energy Efficiency Platform, abbreviated the DEEP. The second objective is to develop a common, accepted and standardized underwriting and investment framework for energy efficiency investments. This is now called the EFIG Underwriting Toolkit, Value and Risk Appraisal Framework for Energy Efficiency Finance and Investments. The DEEP database was launched on the 30th of November last year in connection with the Energy Efficiency Winter Package, or the Energy Winter Package. And the Underwriting Toolkit was launched last week, the week before last actually, in connection with the EU Sustainable Energy Week. These two tools or outputs have been produced by a consortium of different consultants working closely with the EFIG Group and UNEP FI and DG Energy. And I represent this consortium. You can see the partners in the consortium on the slide. Very briefly about the two deliverables before we dig into the details around the DEEP. First, the De-risking Energy Efficiency Platform. It is an open source database. That means there are no access requirements. Anybody can access and use it. It includes energy efficiency investments. The whole idea is that we want to show actually realized energy efficiency projects. The main objective is to improve the understanding of the risks and the benefits of energy efficiency investments. And upon launch, the database includes 7,800 projects in buildings and industry from 25 different data providers. And we're still working throughout this year on getting more projects in, and we hope that around September we will have more than 10,000 projects in the database. We will come back to this in more detail in a second. The other product being delivered under this project is the Value and Risk Appraisal Framework, or the Underwriting Toolkit. The idea is to motivate financial institutions to look at energy efficiency as an investment opportunity and as a way of reducing risks in their property portfolios and their lending portfolios. It will help financial institutions to understand and evaluate the value and risk of energy efficiency, and it provides a framework for doing this, and hopefully also can help developers and project owners to prepare their projects in a way that is easier for financial institutions to assess, and finally contribute to financial institutions and project developers talking a, if not similar language, then at least a language that can be understood by the other party. Both of these two tools are freely available online through the EFIG webpage, which is efig.eu. And they're also available on the links that are provided on this page. I assume the presentation will be available afterwards also. Now, that's a brief introduction, and now we'll dig into the details. first, an overview of the de-risking energy efficiency platform. Currently, it contains around 4,900 buildings projects and 2,400 industry projects from the European Union. And then it contains around 500 projects from the US and a few projects from other countries. They have been provided by 25 different data owners. The data providers is a mixture of companies, public banks, private investment funds, financial institutions, ESCOs, and other people who have access to the project data. The projects in total include an investment of around 1.5 billion in energy efficiency. And as mentioned earlier, the whole idea here is to have a way of assessing the risk and return from energy efficiency projects. And we hope that we've created a user-friendly, transparent way for people to look at this. This gives you an overview of the present data providers. As you can see, it is a mixture of financial institutions like the European Investment Bank and some commercial banks. It also includes national investment funds such as VIPA and another of other investment funds. It includes some some technology providers such as Siemens, Danfoss, Oracle, etc. And it includes EU-funded projects such as the EU Smart City Information System and a number of other sources. I'll come back to the process of getting the data, which was somewhat challenging, as anybody who has tried to establish a database will know. On the user side, you can say that this is quite nerdy. It's a database of energy efficiency projects. How many people will be interested? Well, over the first half year, we've had more than 2,000 different users from more than 70 countries, looking at more than 10,000 pages in the database. Most of the users are from the European Union, but there are users from a very varied group of other countries also. A bit about the process of establishing the DEEP. It has been running throughout the year 2016, and we started out with reviewing other databases globally that had tried to do something similar, or at least try to establish a coherent set of data on energy efficiency projects. We interviewed a number of the people involved in these databases and involved in the development. And interestingly, they all had the same recommendation for us. They said, don't overcomplicate it. You will never get the data. It will be very difficult. We all started being very ambitious. We all started having many kinds of data we wanted, and we always found out that it was impossible to get the data. And then we said, oh no, we will not do the same mistake. And of course, eventually we did. I think it's an inherent part of the process that even if your ambition is to be simple, it tends to be complicated because a lot of people and a lot of stakeholder groups have various needs and wishes that goes beyond what data is actually available. Now, we then defined user groups and use cases, and based on that, we defined what data is needed to meet these user groups' needs. And based on that, we made a data matrix in March of 2016 and a data collection template for collecting the data. During this process, which was highly iterative with the EFIG group and UNEP-FI and the European Union, DG Energy, a number of people, of course, had good ideas for how could this become even more relevant. And the number of data fields increased. I will come back to that. We then made a mock-up of the outputs and presented them to our client, got a lot of feedback, and then started doing the detailed design. In parallel, we established the data privacy terms and terms of use. What was clear when we started talking to data providers, and we actually did that from the very outset, was that different data providers have different needs. Some of them were already committed to making the data public and therefore had no problems in making the data available for any kind of use. Some of them have some restrictions, and some of them, in particular the banks who have funded projects, had loan-term agreements that required confidentiality with their clients and could not provide the data in any format that could be recognized as an individual project. We therefore had to accept that the data in the deep will only be visible in groups of minimum 10 projects. You will never be able to see full information on an individual project in the database. This is a limitation, but it was a requirement for us to be able to access interesting detailed data from financial institutions. Now, it also turns out that data comes in many formats. And even though we make a data collection template, that does not necessarily mean that we get the data back in that format. So a lot of time has gone into data cleaning and clarification of the data received if it doesn't make sense. But anyway, we managed to get ready for the launch in November 2016. It should not say 3, but 30th of November. Now, the data template as it looks today has actually 2 versions. It has a simple version with 20 fields and an advanced version with 200 fields. The advanced version with 200 fields is where we ended up, but it was also clear when we started collecting data that most of those fields is nice to have rather than need to have, and it's information that nobody have registered on their projects. The database template covers project and sector information. It covers energy efficiency investment measures. What is it that has been implemented in the project? And it covers obviously energy consumption data before and after, and financial indicators, most importantly, what is the investment cost, but often also information about how the investment was financed. And further to this, we ask about qualitative indicators such as what the reason was for the investment and whether any benefits beyond the pure energy saving has been realized as a part of the project. What we've learned through this process and what we've learned in connection with the use of the data is that the absolute minimum information for a project to be meaningful in this context is to know the country, because there's a lot of context that relates to the situation in a specific country, and that means that you cannot always compare between countries. We need to know, obviously, whether it's a building or industry. We need to know exactly what measure has been implemented. But beyond that, we can actually get a lot of useful information from the projects as long as we know the investment and we know the energy saving, either in euros or in kilowatt hours per year, ideally in both, and we know whether the energy saving has been independently verified. As long as we have that, a project actually is a useful contribution to the database. And this is basically what we have for all projects. For some projects, we have almost 200 different informations, but that is by far the case for most projects. Now, what comes out of this? Well, to give you a quick couple of examples, we have around 5,000 building projects in the database now. The median payback time for the building projects is 5 years. But of course, medians and averages are dangerous, because below this median, you have on one end lighting projects, for instance, LED replacement of old lighting systems, that has a very short payback time. The median there is 3 years. And at the other end of the scale, you have building fabric measures, which are improvements of walls and roofs and windows, where the median payback time is 11 years. Then we also have a group of projects that we have called integrated renovations. These are projects that includes basically everything, a lot of building fabric measures and lighting and HVAC plant replacement. And most of these projects tend to have very long payback times. The median is 14 years. And the reason is that many of these are really ambitious deep renovations. For instance, very deep renovations of old housing blocks in the Baltic countries, etc. And obviously they have a completely different payback situation than a lighting replacement in a supermarket group in the UK. The problem with median payback times, let's say the average, the advantage of median payback time measures is that they are intuitive and easy to understand. The problem is that they disregard anything that happens beyond the payback. And obviously a deep renovation of a building, a replacement of the roof has a much longer lifetime than a replacement of the lighting system with LED lights. And therefore we are operating with a second key measure that we indicator, which is the avoidance cost. The avoidance cost is the investment cost per kilowatt hour of energy saving over the lifetime of the measure. And that means for a building fabric measure, it is typically over a 30-year lifetime, whereas for a replacement of lighting to LED, it is in the order of 10 years. Interestingly, when you look at the median avoidance cost, which looks over the full lifetime, you will see that building fabric measures are much more attractive. Building fabric measures look expensive based on a median payback time, but they also have a much longer lifetime. So over the whole life of the investment, building fabric measures like improvements of roofs and windows and walls is actually a very attractive investment. The problem is it requires access to long-term financing. It should be noted that the median avoidance cost shown here is without discounting. The DEEP, as I'll show you later, also allows you to introduce discounting. And the moment when you introduce discounting, of course, you will see that the building fabric measures gradually move to the right. It becomes relatively more expensive. Emerging results on the industry side. We have just below 3,000 industry projects. We are getting a couple of thousand more industry projects over the next couple of months. The median payback time for industry projects is very low. It's 2 years. There are some industry projects that has much longer payback times, in particular some of the waste heat recovery and other projects, but the median payback time is very low. And you also see that the median avoidance cost of industry projects is 1.2 euro cents per kilowatt hour. If you compare that to the price paid for energy in the European Union, you will see that industry energy efficiency is still an extremely attractive investment. Now, why should you be interested and why should you use this database? We think this database should have a lot of users because it provides anonymized historical data and is structured along project characteristics that you may be able to filter it on. You will see later that you can easily filter down to looking at a country, looking at specific measures, looking at specific industries or specific types of buildings. And it provides you with insight on a number of different parameters, including the two I have shown, the payback time and the discounted avoidance cost. It clearly documents that there are many investment opportunities within energy efficiency, both in the building area and in the industry area. In the industry area, there are many investment opportunities with a short payback time. In the building area, there are many opportunities, but of course the low-hanging fruits such as LED replacements have largely been taken up over the last 10 years, and we're now moving towards looking at the deeper renovations, the building fabric measures. Further, it allows you to upload, and I will show you this, your own portfolio of projects as a private portfolio and benchmark them against a user-selected subset of projects in the DEEP. We also invite people who have access to data to provide their data to the DEEP, because we're working throughout 2017 to ensure better geographical spread, more projects with verified data, and more projects with information not only on the energy saving but also on multiple benefits, such as did you realize improved working conditions, did you realize improved asset values, etc. And we encourage people to help us achieving this by becoming a data provider. You can do that either directly through the DEEP or by contacting myself or Timothy from the European Union. That was the quick introduction. Now I will do the walkthrough. Ideally, this should have been live on the platform, but I hope that you will trust me that it is much nicer when you use the platform yourself. So I strongly encourage you to become a user. So that's the first step. How do you become a user? It's very simple. You go into the web page, which is called deep.efig.eu, and then you sign in if you're already a user, or you sign up if you're not a user yet. There are no requirements for becoming a user apart from providing an email address and starting up. Then you enter and you start exploring. The first page you will enter is called Key Figures. It has two navigation panels. On the top, there is a navigation panel that gives you access to a PDF user guide. I think it's now around 15, 18 pages, and it's growing as we improve the functionality. It also explains why you should become a data provider, and it provides you with two sets of terms and conditions. The data privacy terms, which explain to you, somebody is saying slide is not shown. Is this correct that you're not able to watch the slide now?
It's okay, Carsten, so go ahead.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Now, the data privacy terms explains to data providers what will happen with the data you provide. And it's important to understand that the data provided to this platform will never be delivered in its raw form to anybody else. It is the ownership of DG Energy, the European Union, and it is only shown in fully anonymized ways. And a part of that means that it's only showed in samples of minimum 10 projects. That also means, as you will see later, if you choose so many filter selections that you end up with a sample of less than 10 projects, the platform will tell you that this cannot be shown. The database terms of use, which is intended for the data users. And that includes things like underlining that any decisions you make on the basis of what is shown in the database is your own responsibility. We do not guarantee you that your project will be representative of what is in the database, and we do not even guarantee that the database is representative of a sample in a specific country. Then it has a button called that presently says English. This is the language switcher. Presently, the data platform is working in English and German languages, and you can switch between the language functions here. And we will later this year be implementing French, Spanish, Italian, and Polish languages. So by the end of this year, it will be a 6-language platform. On the left side, you see the selector for the 6 key functionalities. The first functionality is the key figure, which is the same page as we're on now, and I'll just show you this in a second. And the other 5 functionalities is a overview of the data, which gives you easily downloadable PDFs with some highlights. The view charts, which I personally think is the most useful part of the platform. It is the place where you can do drill down and analysis of the full set of data in the platform. The add and manage project, which is where you can upload your own data, either for inclusion in the database or for privately having it as a portfolio that you can benchmark against the database. The analysis toolbox, which I will show you also, enables you to, in a relatively user-friendly manner, define your own charts. And that means that you can make analysis that goes far beyond what is already shown in the standard charts in the database. And finally, benchmark your projects allow you to compare the projects that you include against the projects in the database. And I'll show you 2 examples towards the end. Now, key figures gives you on the top panel basically the same figures I showed you before. So it gives you the number of projects in total in the database. It gives you the median payback time. It gives you the avoidance cost. And then you can mouse over the map and you will see national figures in the same way. So here I've shown a mouse over of Belgium, and it shows you how many building projects are there in Belgium, what is the median payback time for those buildings projects, and what is the median avoidance cost. Also on the left side you will see there's a small plus and minus. If you click on the minus, it will zoom out from the map, and you will also see that there are North American projects, and you can see data on those North American projects. But the standard is that it shows Europe. Going on to the next functionality, the data overview. The data overview provides you in a fixed standard format a 2-page summary on the key figures for buildings and a similar 2-page summary on the key figures for industry. This is a good place to start for the first-time user. It gives you an idea of what the results you can get from the database are, and it provides you with a definition of the payback time and the avoidance cost. I think for people who are more interested and have seen this once, it is not as interesting as the next functionality, which is the view charts. In the view charts, you can select between buildings and industry, and you can then select a subset of projects where you define the country, you define what measure you want to look at, you define the building type, you define whether you want it to be verified, which is only a subset of the data today, and you can include also a discount rate for calculation of the avoidance cost. Whenever you make selections on these filters, you will see that the number of projects included on the top right side. Let's see if I can get there. So you have the selection of either buildings or industry here. We never mix buildings and industry. It's too different. You cannot make a reasonable comparison of those. Then we have the filters here that you may choose: country, measure type, building, verification, and discount rate. And whenever you choose a filter, you will see that the number of projects in that filter will change. Without filters, there are 5,094 building projects, but as soon as you start selecting filters, you will see that there will be fewer. And then if you want to remove the filters, you can do this here. Below, you then have a number of different standard charts. I will show you 2 of these. I will show you the payback per measure and the avoidance cost per measure, but you can experiment with the other ones yourself. If we first look at the payback per measure for buildings, and I've then limited this to EU 28, so it excludes the US projects included in the database, and you will see that that means that the number of buildings now went down to 4,500 projects. This reflects 2 things. It reflects that I've limited the number of countries included, but it also reflects that not necessarily all projects have data on payback time, because payback time requires you to have a data not only on the investment, we have investment for all projects, but also on the savings in euros. Whereas the avoidance cost requires you to have data on the investment cost and on the savings in kilowatt hours. And unfortunately, not all projects have provided both savings in euros and savings in kilowatt hours. That's why there are only 4,500 projects now. What it then shows you is a distributional chart for each of the measure types. So it shows you the red arrow here, the red line is the median. You will see that for lighting, the median is around 3 years payback time, whereas for building fabric measures, the median is around 11. But obviously, it's not the only information that is interesting. It's also interesting to see how wide is the distribution around this median. And this is why you are here seeing the 10%, 25%, 75%, and 90% percentile in the distribution. This means that only the remaining 10% beyond the 90 has of the lighting projects has a payback time that is beyond around 9.5 years. If you mouse over, you will see the actual numbers, but I can unfortunately not do this on the slide. I think I have an example later. So it's the bottom of the line below the box is the 10% fractile. The lower edge of the box is the 25%. The red line is the median. The upper edge of the box is the 75%. And the upper end of the line above the box is the 90%. Now, moving on, you can see similarly on the avoidance cost, you get a chart that shows you the distribution for each of the measures of the avoidance cost for buildings. What we'll try to do now is to change the discount rate. I mentioned earlier that the building fabric measures comes out looking very attractive on an avoidance cost basis because this is over a 30-year lifetime, but it is excluding discounting. So now we try to change the discount rate and see what happens. If we do that, let's say we go to 10%. As these numbers are real, it's a quite high discount rate. If you move to 10%, you will see that building fabric measures is now no longer the cheapest option for energy efficiency. But it's still quite comparable to lighting, having a shorter lifetime. And as I mentioned earlier, the group called integrated renovation is slightly different because it includes some very ambitious deep renovation projects, and some of these are also really demonstration projects for new technologies. Similarly, and here we have the example where you can show, so this is for industry, and it's for avoidance cost. And it shows you the different standard categories that we have for industry measures and what are the avoidance costs. And you will see this is an example where we've shown the mouse over. If you mouse over a specific box, and here there was a mouse over of the bump with box with pumps, it shows you how many projects are in this category, what is the median, and what are the percentiles. Obviously, if there are 110 projects in the category, the data is probably more credible on average than if there is only 15 projects. Moving on to the function with adding and managing projects. In the function here, we allow you to either use a simple data entry, which is the 20 fields, or an advanced data entry, which is the 200 fields. There is also the opportunity of getting an Excel sheet where you can provide the data and then we can upload the data for you. Most of these fields are relatively simple, and you can also, if you mouse over a specific field, there will be a text box explaining what kind of data should be included. One of the fields is more complex, and that is the building measure, the energy efficiency measure. When you say select measure, you will get a drop-down menu here where you can mark what kind of energy efficiency measures was included in the project. And you will see here that there are two levels shown. For instance, we have building fabric measures in general, And then we have the opportunity to specify that what I did was I made a wall improvement. And you can actually also fold this out to a third level and provide specific details about what kind of improvement was included. Again, we find that different sources of data have very different granularity in their data. Some of them, in particular, some of the building fabric measures have, some of the industry measures are very detailed and are able to show us on level 3, which is the level beyond, what was actually done. But many of the building projects only have information on level 1 saying we did something about the building fabric. It had this cost, it improved the energy consumption from so much before to so much after. The charts I showed earlier included building fabric measures as one joint category. When you go into the deep yourself, you will see that actually below this chart there is another chart that folds out and includes data on the subcategories also. So you will see both on the level 1 and the level 2. The analysis toolbox, which is the next to large functionality, allows the interested user to define their own charts. It is explained in more detail in the PDF guide that is available on the front page. I'll not go into details in how to do this, but this gives an example of one thing that could be done. What I've shown here is a chart that shows you the parameter we have that says additional benefits triggered, where people can tell you whether they also had carbon emission reductions as a benefit, whether they had reduced maintenance, whether they had an improvement in health and safety, etc., etc. And you will see here that out of the projects that provided data, and I think as far as I remember, it was 790 projects providing this data, almost all of them said that they had carbon emission reductions as an additional benefit, but quite a number of them also said that they experienced reduced maintenance costs or they experienced improved health and safety. Unfortunately, we don't have a quantification of this. It's only a drop-down menu that allows people to trigger it. Finally, I will show you the benchmarking functionality, and I will show you 2 examples. The idea here is that you have your own portfolio of projects that you would like to compare to a relevant extract of data from the database. Here we have assumed that a user has an industry portfolio. It could be the CFO of a large conglomerate that is considering a portfolio of different compressed air projects. And he has a portfolio of 27 projects. He will then enter those as a private portfolio in the managed project section. It will only be visible to himself. And he can then select either the whole portfolio or he can select a part of that. You can try that functionality yourself. And then you can you can see here he has 27 projects. And there's a functionality that says select projects where you can see your whole portfolio, and then you can select the ones that you think are relevant for the exercise. And then you can select what you want to compare it to. In this example, we've said these are compressed air projects. We don't want to compare them to pump projects or waste heat recovery projects. We only want to compare them to compressed air projects. There are 626 compressed air projects in the database. And you will see in this example, this shows you the distribution of the 626 reference projects. And this shows you the characteristics of the 27 projects in the user's private data. And then you have a table down here also that shows you the statistical characteristics of both of the samples. Another similar example, which is the last thing I'll show before the Q&A, is for buildings. Here we have assumed that a user in the United Kingdom is looking at 15 educational buildings that he wants to compare to the educational buildings in the database. He then selects United Kingdom and educational buildings, and he selected, he wants to see how does this payback time compare between his portfolio and the database. And again, you will see here the statistical characteristics of his sample of 15 projects and the characteristics of the reference data. Here it's surprisingly close, which also reflects that I have to take the data from somewhere. So the 15 projects here are actually a subset of the 35. Sorry. This was the walkthrough of the database. As I said before, it's much nicer in reality. So I can only recommend that you sign up and you try to use it. And of course, we'd love to have feedback from users. We're still running this project until Christmas, and we have some resources for improving it further. That's all for me for now, and I look forward to answering questions.